morning and good evening, and also wherever you are. And this is actually the sixth annual section of the China Global Think Tank, Innovation Think Tank. So welcome to all of you. And I'm Hamre Huiyao Wang, founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization. Thank you for tuning in this special opening dialogue of our sixth annual China Global Think Tank Innovation Forum 2021, live from CCG head office here in Beijing. We're in our conference room. Today, we are very honored, actually very pleased to have an old friend, also Dr. Hamre. He's the president of one of the most prominent think tanks in the US, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, we're short named the CSIS. So he's taking out his time in the evening here with us. So we're going to explore the topics that are centered about think tanks, about American foreign policy, about pandemic changes, about think tank innovation, which is our conference today, but also about area we can collaborate. I would like to briefly introduce Dr. Hamre. He's the president and CEO and a Langong chair in American leadership at CSIS. Before joining CSI, he served as the 26th U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense and held senior positions in the U.S. Senator Armed Service Committee and the Congressional Budget Office. He has a numerous involvement in his previous career. And he received his PhD with distinction from CSIS of the Johns Hopkins University in 1978. So welcome, John, and it's great to see you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wang, and congratulations to you and the Center for China and Globalization. My goodness, what a wonderful job you've done in building this institution. It's very impressive.
Thank you. Actually, we are today, we are having this sixth annual Global Think Tank Innovation Summit. So we have very privileged to invite you as the opening speaker, and we're going to have followed by a next panel. We're going to have 5 think tanks from US and China to talk about further. But for this one, we are actually entering a very interesting time, and as during our this start of the discussion, we know that the world has changed fundamentally. We are facing pandemic, and we're having a lot of challenges, and the world is really at a crossroad. And so, given your experience in leading the think tank of one of the leading think tank in the world. So we would like to open with you on the think tank topic. As we know, CSIS is a think tank that was founded in 1962, which is almost 60 years ago, and you've been at home. You've been running that think tank for 20 years. Make that into when you come to that think tank, the think tank still have a deficit. Now you make that into one of the most influential think tank in the world. So what's your experience in you share with us how you have built up this think tank, and what is your experience and what is the your recommendation for our think tank community, because we are having a think tank conference today.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Wang, I made so many mistakes when I came to CSIS, and you're right, we were in very deep trouble when I first came to CSIS, but we were able to get out of it. I think in one sense, our poverty was helpful because we were so poor back then. We had to raise 97% of our budget every year. So I had to listen carefully to what the market wanted. I didn't have the luxury of just doing my own thing. We had to listen to what were the problems people were experiencing and how could we make a contribution. And then the key to success is the quality of your staff. I inherited a staff that wasn't very strong, to be honest, and the entire journey of my 21 years has been to hire really good people. And so that's, hire good people, give them a lot of flexibility, and establish the culture so that people feel that they have to do honest and objective work.
That's really great. Yeah, I mean, talent is always important. So I'd like to actually, come to the recent CSIS released a report. It's called "Advancing U.S.-China Healthy Security Cooperation in an Area of a Strategic Competition," which revolved around the area of U.S.-China can work together. For example, on the health, including vaccine, travel, public health infrastructure, biosafety, supply chain, and countering disinformation. And so, as you know, that think tank these days, can play a very active role in terms of making those recommendations. So, what do you think now? We are facing this once in a century, probably, catastrophe of this pandemic. Where did you see where we can get out of that, and how we can really work together? I mean, internationally at multilateral level, and of course also China, U.S. as two largest leading country in the economy in the world. How we can work together and things like that.
Yeah, this is a very large and important question. There's a central paradox that we've experienced these last 2 years. It's very clear with something like a pandemic that no one country can act on its own and protect itself. I mean, there has to be international cooperation to deal with something like a global pandemic. But people that lead countries naturally respond to the pressure within their own country. And so there's a parochialism that becomes very strong in a period like this. Every country in the world basically tried to find solutions for themselves to deal with a pandemic. And it highlighted that international health organizations are not strong organizations. So I do think there is some very fundamental thinking that we need to do, because China isn't going to give up its capacity to decide its own path for health, public health. We're going to hold on to that ourselves. But we do have to find ways where we can cooperate. I think the bright spot over the last 2 years was with the medical research community, where there were international networks that communicated with each other and joined together in a shared effort. In the private sector, international cooperation was very impressive. In the public sector, governments, the cooperation wasn't so good, but in the private sector, it was very good. And so I think it's a bit of an idea about what we could do in a broader sense so we could work together. How do we help our respective civil societies to work more closely on medical preparedness? I think that's a real opportunity. Now, specifically on China, look, I'm unhappy about the direction we're in right now. There's a lot of tension between our two countries. We have to find ways where we can work on shared problems. And certainly public health, global public health, is a shared problem. So I think there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Actually, I know that both U.S. and China are really favor that patent wavering, for developing countries in terms of producing the vaccine, and hopefully at the coming up at WTO ministerial meetings, WTO, U.S. and China can reach something on these new efforts in terms of supporting developing countries and getting vaccine. So unless everyone is safe, we're finally safe. We got to make a lot of lead on that. You're right. China and the U.S. can work many ways and on that. And you also mentioned about U.S.-China cooperation, and also you're not satisfied with the current situation. That you think there's ways to collaborate, and so we're glad to see that China and the U.S. has actually made a joint statement that COP26 on climate change. So that is another big area. We can collaborate, and pandemic could come again, or even we are in. So what do you think about the climate change and the things that we can also work together in terms of the common background?
Well, I do think it is an area that we can work together. I'm impressed by a lot of the forward-looking policies that China has. For example, on electric vehicles. I mean, it's impressive what China is proposing to do for itself. Obviously, you are a country in transition, energy transition. We are too. But you're in a country with energy transition. And so I think there are opportunities that we could explore. Where can we collaborate on climate change? We do have to find a number of things where we can at least have conversations with each other, look at potentially joint projects, just like in the healthcare area. I mean, there was actually a fairly robust collaboration between our medical scientists, for many years, which was a good thing because it became the foundation point for the cooperation that did exist for the pandemic. So we should look for these opportunities, Dr. Wang.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. John Hamre. So what I think that really make the two countries interesting now is that the world has a lot of common demand, actually. For example, the infrastructure. We see that worldwide there is a huge demand for infrastructure, developing countries, but also developed countries. I noticed that European leader just announced last week they're going to come up with 350 billion euro on putting the Euro Gateway, EU Gateway project for infrastructure. President Biden mentioned about past his 1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, and on the same day he talked to President Xi after he signed that bill. And of course, China has this Belt and Road Initiative, which has been carrying on for the last 8 years. So infrastructure-wise, I mean, we had the World Bank, we had the BRICS New Development Bank, we had the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. On this, and also G7 proposed the Build Back Better, D3W by President Biden. So do you think that we can really, work together on those infrastructure where I think we have the biggest denominator, biggest draw of the future benefits for everyone? And that's where probably can sustain us for the next half a century of prosperity and success and growth potential. So what do you think about that? All those areas that we could work on infrastructure.
Yeah, there's an astounding demand around the world for infrastructure building. In some places for brand new infrastructure, in some places like in the United States for modernizing our infrastructure. It's I'll be honest, it's rather embarrassing to look at the state of a lot of America's bridges and roads. Our airports are not, they're disappointing. So there's a lot that we should do, but globally infrastructure is a major issue. And I think what we should probably do is start by looking at what are the areas where we know that there is a trend we're all going to want to deal with, such as how do we build sustainable infrastructure that has a revenue base underneath it, so it doesn't become a white elephant. It doesn't become a very giant project that can't support itself financially. So I think there's some financial things. I think we need to find ways to help third third world countries to do a better job of managing complex tender offerings. This is a complicated thing. Infrastructure projects are big and elaborate and complex. Helping other countries do a better job of deciding what's in their interest, what is sustainable. Those, I think, would be things we could work on together.
Yeah, that's great. And so, John, I mean, we're also the theme of our topic today is also American foreign policy, and we know that I know it's very significant that President Biden actually, when he said during the Afghanistan withdrawal, he said from now on the U.S. will no longer seek nation building, and which I think it's a very serious reflection of what has been happening in the last 2 decades in Afghanistan, and maybe to that matter to other countries. So, what do you think on that U.S. foreign policy front? Is there some deep thinking and a reflection going on, and particularly President Biden saying that is there a paradigm shift or something like that?
Well, I think President Biden was reflecting what the American public feels, which is we were in Afghanistan, we didn't have a strategy, we were not successful, and we shouldn't get involved in things where we don't know what we're doing. I think that was basically the commentary that was behind that statement. Now, does it mean that America is going to pull back from working with other countries in the world towards, building stronger institutions, et cetera? No, I don't think it means that we'll abandon that. But I do think it means that Americans feel, certainly the Biden administration feels this, but I think most Americans do, that we used the military too excessively and we didn't really have a plan and we were not successful. And so it's, I think, a foreign policy that is more focused on solid economics, on social development, and on traditional diplomacy is, I think, what he's talking about. The term nation building, it took on a quality of an American, we were going to shape the world so it looked like us. And I think that is over. I don't think we're doing that any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, John. And I also noticed, actually, President Biden said during the President Xi and the President Biden virtual summit just recently, President Biden said, U.S. does not seeking to change China and does not also wants to have alliance against China. So he also recognized one China policy. So he showed some, positive attitudes there. So but we are actually seeing, probably U.S. is divided. You have a very hawkish Congress. You have other stakeholders. So what do you think about can we really, China-U.S. relation? If China, on its own, can become the second largest economy, there must be something done right. And so how can we really peacefully coexisting, as President Xi put it in the statement when he met virtually with President Biden? So what do you think about, in general assessment, that what we can do about Sino-U.S. relations?
Yeah, the sentiments in Washington are very negative right now about China, and I think that's very unfortunate, because it makes it hard for us to develop, real ideas, real policies in a constructive way. Look, we're two great countries. We have global interests. We're going to have areas where we're going to disagree with each other. We're going to rub up against each other, in ways. So we know, because we've got these complex, multidimensional interests, and they're not always aligned. Sometimes they're in tension. We have to find ways where we don't let the tension overwhelm us and prevent us from having the kind of constructive conversation to work through the problems. Now, in the U.S., I think in Washington, I'll say in Washington, there are basically two camps, and one camp believes that China is racing ahead. It's going to be dangerous. We better stop them any way we can. That's one camp. The second camp, and I'm in the second camp, the second camp is this is a huge, unprecedented competition. We're out of shape. It's like a runner that hasn't been exercising. Well, we're out of shape. We're going to have to get in shape if we're going to stay up in this competition. So instead of trying to trip China because it's running ahead of us, we need to work harder to run faster. So I think I'm in the second camp. I believe that America's focus ought to be on improving ourselves, fixing our own problems, overcoming the problems within our own society. This is where I think we should be focusing, rather than having the conversation with China being about opposition to everything you say or do. That's going to go nowhere, in my view. So I'm in the camp that says if America is going to compete effectively, we've got to get stronger internally.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I think that is really more realistic and a rational approach. So thank you for your comment. And we know that the U.S. is coming up with a midterm election next year, and so how do you assess the U.S. The political landscape? I mean, we have Democrats barely have a majority at the Senate House, and of course, we see the gap of the top elite and the massive population in the U.S. The gap is still widening. I mean, in terms of the middle class, haven't seen their real income gone up in the last 20, 30 years, and whereas China now, I mean, they preempting that. They have been starting to, common prosperity and lift 800 million people out of poverty, so prevent the populism, this kind of drive. So I think that, with Trump, even though he's not in office, but Trumpism is still very thriving. And so how do you assess the political, future of next 2 years, where it's very important if the U.S., direction the U.S. is taking, it's affecting the world, it's affecting U.S.-China relations. And you are the top expert on U.S. think tank, so probably this is your area. Yeah.
Well, I'm hardly an expert, but I think about this all the time. America has had two periods in its history where there were profound changes in our political system. One was about 1842, basically, to 1860. And of course, it ended in a civil war, which was a bad thing. The other big period of change, lots of tension, politics got turned upside down, was from about 1885 until 1915. In both cases, it lasted over 20 years, and I'm afraid we're in the front end of probably a 20-year period where our politics is going through profound restructuring. And I have my own personal views about it. I don't think either political party here is effectively focusing on the challenges we're going to face over the next 10 years or 15 years. I think both of the parties are battling over their policies of the past rather than looking forward to the future. So I think we're going to be internally divided. I think there's still going to be a lot of progressive work, but it's going to happen more at the state level. And I think the economic disparity that you mentioned is very real and is going to be the greatest thing we're going to have to work on. And I would say that's the big debate that we have right now between the Democrats and the Republicans. But I don't know that what's going to come out of it is going to be a breakthrough. I think we're going to have internal tension in the United States probably for the next 15 years.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And I noticed that in your previous discussion or statement that you mentioned about you think that the TPP is a good idea, and maybe U.S. should be back on that. And actually, now we're having the WTO kind of a marginalized and paralyzed, if not use that word. And then we see the RCEP is being effected January 1st next year. CPTPP is one of the most advanced trade, free trade agreement among initially designed by the U.S. largely, and now U.S. is back out of that. But China actually showed a great interest. China actually, Premier Li and President Xi all expressed strong interest to join the CPTPP, and actually UK is applying that. South Korea may apply that. So do you think probably if also maybe US is coming back someday? So we have a new platform to talk about the 21st century trade issues, and because the WTO cannot solve things because it's get so clumsy, and one is 64 members, whereas TPP have 12, 13, 14 members. We can really work on something on that and solve those difficult issues, and then we may lead the world for a guaranteed trade prosperity, investment prosperity. So what do you think about this, CPTPP that we what it can bring and what can be working together?
Well, I thought it was a major mistake on the part of President Trump to pull out of the TPP. And I'm glad that Japan moved forward to work on the CPTPP. That acronym I struggle with it, but I thought that was a very good thing that they did that. I wish that the Biden administration would see the opportunity to join CPTPP, but I don't know that they're going to. And that's a mistake in my view. I mean, in my view, we should be leaning forward. Every country has to find ways to get higher productivity in their economies in order to pay for the different things we have to do. You have an aging society. We have an aging society. We've got a widened gap in economic opportunity in America. The best way, one of the few really good ways to deal with that is to expand and open up wider on trade opportunities. I don't know that the Biden administration is going to see it that way, unfortunately. But I do think, and I also think that there is a larger restructuring underway now. We're starting to see it started before the COVID pandemic, but we're starting to see instead of globalization, we're starting to see regionalization of trade patterns. And of course, that was a very large push of the Trump administration to bring manufacturing back to the United States. I do think that there is a big sorting out that's going on now. My personal concern is that I'm worried because of the tension between China and the United States and the policies that we're taking. We could be, unfortunately, dividing the global economy into two spheres. And I don't know that that's going to be good for anybody. I mean, it isn't going to be a catastrophe, but I don't think it's the best interests of everyone. And the trend we're on right now is very much towards bifurcating the international economic order. And I think the trade issue fits into that, Henry. So I think there needs to be a larger conversation about where is the global economy going? What trends are underway? Can we manage the trends that are emerging? There's some big issues here. And of course, with the Center for China and Globalization, this is a pretty big deal for you. So it's a conversation we should probably have together at some point.
Yeah. Thank you, John. And so actually, that I'm very pleased to see that USTR Kathleen Chai spoke at just CSIS just not too long ago, and she actually said recoupling, and so right. I mean, I think that she's talking to Vice Premier Liu He and China counterpart, and trade is probably the biggest connectivity between our two countries. And U.S. companies still doing a lot of business in China, like a Universal Studio they just opened in Beijing. It's the largest in the world, and it's only opened a third of it. It's already the largest in the world. We have millions of people flooded there. I can't get a ticket to see the Universal Studio in Beijing. So the potential for U.S. business is enormous, and we can't see how we can. Tesla is doing fabulous here, and Boeing and Qualcomm and many other U.S. companies. So you're right. I mean, this business that we have a bipolar world, we have a two sphere of system that is going to be really destructive to the world. So I agree that we really need to work together. And so finally, we had about we already have about 10,000 people watch online. We have 100 people conference from all think tank community. We're going to have a lot of things going on this whole day. So John, you're really kind to be our first speaker. And since today is a think tank innovation conference summit, so we like to come back again on some think tank question, because like in the U.S. you have a revolving door, you have a nonpartisan stand, you have how this running a U.S. think tank. I know you moved to a new building a few years back. When I first went to CSI, it was actually on a very small office. Now you have a huge building now. So how do you think tank advice? How does the U.S. think tank and what can be shared with Chinese colleagues during our think tank today conference?
Well, Henry, I would look. I can only speak about America. I don't know other countries well enough to really talk about their systems. But I know in America, we're in a period where our two political parties are so busy just fighting each other over small matters that they don't have time to think about big ideas. So that's what think tanks are now doing. That's what we're now trying to do. We're trying to do strategic thinking for America. And I think that's a role that think tanks in general should be embracing. We have to develop ideas and test them out, explore them. How would they work? Where would they not work? I mean, we have to do all of that because right now our governments are struggling to find ways to work with each other. And I think it's very important. I think in my 21 years at CSIS, I feel like we're just starting to pick up our real program because I think the future we're going to need people like CSIS and other think tanks. We're going to have a much bigger role to play over the next 20 years. So, and I think that's probably the case around the world. I mean, governments struggle to deal with new ideas. New ideas come in, and usually big bureaucracies take old ideas and make them more complicated. They don't invent new ideas. So think tanks have to do that. And that's where we have to have good, constructive relations with our own government, but then also open conversations with friends in other countries.
That's great. And so, John, I mean, I personally visited CSIS many times and participate quite a few activities, even one debate at one time. And also, I know that we had an event this year with a Singapore think tank, CSIS, CCG together. You spoke there as well. So what do you think about the track 2? The 1.5 track that think tank dialogues, particularly U.S. and China, can bring the relationship into more understanding, into more better communication. As you said, the government probably too busy. We can provide a lot of ideas and in those dialogues. So what do you think about that? And particularly during this difficult time, and also plus the pandemic, we need more think tank dialogues like we have today.
I absolutely agree. I think over the next 10 years, track 1.5, track 2 dialogues are going to be more important than any time in our history. It's hard for the governments to meet each other because the politicians are so busy throwing rocks at the other side. Okay, we can at least meet and talk to each other as professionals and as friends. That doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but it means we can have an honest conversation with each other. And I think it's very hard for that to happen now in government circles. So we have a very important mission, I think, over the next, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I mean, it's going to be more important than ever that we explore in conversations like we're having now. Okay, where do we disagree? And why do we disagree? And what can we do about it? There have to be some parts where we have common interests, even though we don't talk about it to each other. What are those? What are those things? And then we're going to be in a better position when we have real hard issues that we have to share with each other, because we're going to have that. We're big countries. I mean, that's unavoidable. But we do have to have a framework where we can talk to each other. And I think that's what track 1.5 is going to be, especially over the next 10, 15 years.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you, John Hamre. That's Dr. Hamre. Actually, you are really sharing a very valuable insights this morning and this evening. And, we talked quite a few things about how U.S.-China can collaborate. We talk about climate change, fighting pandemic, infrastructure, U.S. foreign policy, and also U.S. internal politics, and of course, China-U.S. cooperation, and the importance of think tank in a contemporary world as well. So really, it's a fascinating opening panel for opening section for our think tank conference today. So on behalf of Center for China Globalization, I want to thank you so much, Dr. John Hamre, President of CSIS, one of the most influential think tank in the U.S. So I appreciate your comment, your last word, and we say goodbye to you.
Well, let me say again how much I admire what you've done, Dr. Wang, at the Center for China and Globalization. I'm very impressed by the scholars you have, the professionalism of your programs. I'm sorry these last 2 years we've not been able to meet, but we can do it this way. And as I said, I do feel we're in a period of time where we're going to have to be honest with each other about where we disagree, but we have to have a framework where we're talking to each other where we can understand each other. And I think you will play a crucial role in that, and I hope that we can continue to work together.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you for your fabulous discussion. Thank you.
I appreciate being invited. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye now.